All right, well, greetings, my fellow product managers. What's this data pipeline thing you keep talking about? This is an actual question from one of my previous coworkers. I was the director of reporting at one of my previous companies that were mentioned earlier, and I was explaining how the product analytics pipeline was going to work behind the scenes, and I got these puzzled looks, and one of the PMs raised his hand and said, "Fel, what's this data pipeline thing you keep talking about?" And I then realized there was a need to explain to product managers all of the joys and perils of managing data behind the scenes. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And on the topic of perils, we're going to start with the sad tale of Bobby in the corner. Bobby was a fresh-faced new hire for his company. He was friendly, good with technology, and he mastered his job very quickly. And he became an asset to everyone in the company. He automated lots of common tasks with Excel macros and even wrote some PowerShell scripts to automate a lot of the common reports that the finance department ran. Now, word began to get around that Bobby was a spreadsheet genius. In the break room, a young woman named Lucy even struck up a conversation with him about a staffing trends dashboard that he created. It was the first time in Bobby's life that an unrelated female started a conversation with him. But seeds of doubt began to germinate in our young hero's mind. The scripts upon which the finance department were relying on were now mysteriously breaking. On top of that, some data sources began to change both their format and key values without any warning. And he was able to fix these over a weekend, but cracks in the facade were beginning to show. His coworkers, envious of his initial success, began a whispering campaign about concerns about bad data. And Bobby didn't know how to respond to these because he never thought about data quality in his script development. Whoops. When Bobby walked past Lucy in the break room, she walked right past him, rolled her eyes, and said, "Such poor data lineage. I just can't even." So the moral of this story is, nobody puts Bobby in a corner. And thank you for the 10 people who laughed at my dirty dancing joke there. So today we are going to talk more about the value and the perils of data management as it pertains to data product management, with the idea of avoiding some of those perils in our lives. All right, so everyone gets all excited about the fun and exciting things we can do with data products, and with good reason. But what a lot of people don't understand is that beneath the surface, there is a lot going on with those data products, and a lot more than most people think about. First, data infrastructure. We need to have a place to store and play with all this data that our companies are generating. Our companies need to have a culture and practices of data governance that imposes order on data, gives it a job, and makes it valuable for the business. Information security and compliance. Countries around the world are coming up with new data protection policies and confidentiality policies that have to be followed. And compliance, we have to comply with those to stay in business in some of these countries. Data quality. We're going to talk more about this later, but this is the practice and the technologies that go around and go through ensuring that we have good data. Data stewardship. This is the practice of enforcing the data governance policies that the data governance function creates. Master data management. This is bringing together many different sources of data and coming up with a single definition of common business terms like product, customer, employee, and making sure everyone's on the same page and making sure that all the multiple data sources that feed those definitions, that we come out with one and have a single source of truth. Metadata. This literally means data about data, and it can really save your rear end. It helps define where the data came from, where it's going, and tells us everything we need to know about our data and our business. Customer engagement. As we heard from Yulia earlier, we are doing things for customers to help them get the jobs to be done complete that they have. So we have to continually engage customers and understand the vocabulary they use to describe their business problems. Agile dimensional modeling, one of my favorite all-time nerdy buzzwords. So this is just crafting tables and columns only as we need them to support a prioritized user story. And along with that, data pipelines, which is incrementally developing those data or populating those tables and columns that we came up with our Agile dimensional model. And finally, data value. We're working really hard to create new data assets for our company. We should take the time to account for the cost of creating it as well as the business benefits. So I think the big takeaway from this slide is that if you are managing a data product or just managing a software product that uses data, you and your report chain and your stakeholders need to understand that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and this slide will help you. So why should we care about data management? Data management, as I mentioned earlier, is a dark art. No one thinks about it until it's too late. Few people understand it, fewer get it right, and it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. It is necessary for data-driven product development. So if you go look on product manager job descriptions, they talk about data-driven development, MVPs. So this can help us with product analytics, trying to define what our users are actually doing, not just what they say they do when they use our products. Data can provide very valuable product enhancements. We'll get a little bit more into this later. You could end up managing data products. The data product manager is legitimately a thing. This is a lot of job post boards. So, take what we were learning here, and this might turn out to be a valuable career direction for you. And finally, we need to have intelligent conversations with data people to do all these other things. So we're going to talk more about the common concepts and vocabulary about data management as we proceed in this presentation. So on the topic of challenges with data at work, this slide is going to represent the data environment that I came into the first day on the job at a previous employer. This was a healthcare organization, and this company used claims and membership data from 4 different insurance companies in its daily operations. And as you're going to see, it was quite a challenge at first. There was an executive dashboard that all 4 of these data pipelines had to fill. Each one had a different format. Each one had a different definition of members and claims that all had to be reconciled to develop this monthly executive dashboard. The same thing also went into the attribution engine that matched members to physicians. Again, we had to reconcile and create a common definition of members and claims to create this attribution dashboard. The members and claims need to be aggregated every year to define which physicians earn shared savings. Again, another reconciliation and a combination of data. We had to bundle up all this data once a month and send it to a third-party vendor for their practice dashboards. And there's innumerable ad hoc requests. So I think just looking at this messy slide, you can see that there's a lot of problems here. Number one, there's no true single source of truth. It's being recreated with every individual process. Healthcare claims data are notorious for changing format and having really terrible data quality. And it really makes it important to have inbound data profiling and data governance when you're dealing with healthcare data. High technical debt. There's a lot of manual interventions that went into this, and there's a lot of remediation and all this, how it was actually processed just lived in people's heads. And it's very resource intensive, and there's really no compelling unified vision for how we were going to manage all this data and if we knew we were really getting value out of it. So what we need is a consistent, unified, comprehensive way to think about and store and manage our data. And one metaphor that I like to use to describe this is the data sugar factory. So think about the sugar that we pour in our coffee every morning. Raw sugar cane comes from many different parts of the world, and it comes to us in many different species of sugarcane plant. And I know these are the right names for these plants because I looked them up on Wikipedia, so they have to be true. So how do we turn all that disparate different types of sugarcane from all those different parts of the world into those little sugar crystals we use every morning? Well, we need a sugar factory where all that sugarcane can be received and marshaled and shredded and evaporated and boiled and crystallized and shredded and packaged into that sugar that we pour out in the morning. But once it's in that form, it can be reused for many other things, such as cookies, ice cream, birthday cakes, and my personal favorite, the cookies and cream milkshake from Chick-fil-A. It is so good. So with this metaphor in mind, let's talk about how to, let's go look at what the data sugar factory actually looks like. So data on its own is wild and unruly, and it needs to be tamed in order to become valuable for your products and your business. So when I say curation here, this is the acquisition and the cleansing of data. When I say enrichment, this is conforming it to a common format, enhancing it, data quality testing it, and distributing it out to many different users. So, and that's what this slide is going to be about. So it all starts with data governance. Data governance is the discipline of maximizing the value of your data. So that's my quick and dirty explanation of what data governance is. So what I've showed here is there's different models of data governance. I'm just showing the federated model, which is something I've used in the past, where data governance policies are made at the executive and VP level, so they have some consistency across the organization, as well as some teeth to really get people to adhere to them. But then the enforcement and the interpretation is delegated down to the department level. Every data platform starts with data sources. I've listed some common ones here, but there's many, many more besides this. All this data is then drawn into a data platform using the discipline of data extraction. And upon receiving this data within our enterprise, it's good practice to perform some inbound classification, do data profiling on it, and make it available in Enterprise Data Catalog. And when I say profiling, that's just scanning the data to get a feel for what tables are there, what columns are there, where are the values, what's good data, what's not good data, just getting to know that data when it comes in the door. By the way, another buzzword to help you debunk this is that when we combine many different raw data sources in the same data platform, that's a data lake. Okay, then like with the sugar factory, when it's going through the process of being shredded and boiled and conformed into that little crystalline structures, this is what we do with data. We test it, cleanse it, and we conform it down into a common format, which is often called an analytical dimensional model. And there are different thoughts on this in the data lake world, which I won't get into here. But we want to have that common point of view of those, the common business entities that we work with, like customer, SKU, employee, et cetera. And some of that thinking and intelligence is captured in this analytical dimensional model. The metric library, in some previous jobs I encountered, the same metric was calculated or shown differently in two different places, even though it was the exact same metric with the same filtering criteria. And that's a big frustration for users. And a centralized metric library helps us get around that. Okay, so we've talked about how to get from source to target in the data lake world. I'm going to list out some of the additional little services that are really helpful to help facilitate this path of our data from source to target. So first is agile data development. So I know many of you are familiar with Agile in your product manager lives, and we can apply the same thinking to Agile data development. We change out only the data sources we need when we need them, and then we test and iterate with customers. ELT, ETL, and data ops. So ELT, this stands for extract, transform, and load. It's kind of a nerdy term. The ETL is common in the data warehousing world. ELT is common in the data lake world. It's just the practice of extracting and transforming and cleansing the data to make it useful for end use. And when I say data ops, after those transformations have been deployed to production, it's then making them, running them on an ongoing basis. DevOps, just like with software development, you need strong DevOps to deploy new transformations and new data models without upsetting the customer experience. I talked about metadata earlier. Let me camp out a little bit on data quality. I really, really hate bad data. It really sucks. Our users have an intuitive and emotional connection to the data that they're looking at on dashboards and reports. So if they get a sense that that data is wrong, that's a virus that gets implanted in their mind, and it's like a disease that spreads through all of the other data products that you produce. Because if they don't trust that data, they're not going to use it. And your data products or the products you manage that make a great use of data, if they don't have trust in that data, then you're really going to have a problem with acceptance and adaptation. When I was at Memorial Hermann Physicians Network, Dan and Arturo, I'm going to go off script here a little bit. I'm just going to camp out on this for a few minutes. I was sitting in the corner, and the CMO, Chief Medical Officer, came to me and said, "Hey, Phil, come over here for a second." So I went and joined him in the office with the Director of Analytics, and she had a rather forlorn look on her face. And I was supporting a population health executive dashboard at the time. And he started walking me through some of the physicians, showing their per member per month spending, and most of them were between $100,000 and $200,000, until he got to Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith had a PMPM of $27 million. $27 million. So the CMO said, Phil, what's going on with this data here? I think it's bad data. And there was a long, awkward pause. And he very kindly said, "I don't like bad data." And then the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. So that helps illustrate how there's just a very tight emotional connection with bad data. And these data products, they work in a political environment. So back in that Memorial Hermann example, there were some pretty tough politics there. And if this executive dashboard that the CMO had been championing to his colleagues is showing this egregious $27 million error, that's a problem for him. That could really be damaging him politically. So just be aware how data quality operates in a political context. Okay, I'm just going to skip through. I'm going to go forward. Okay, I'm just going to skip through the rest of these builds. All right, so harnessing data products for business value. So we ended up managing data products. Again, the data product manager's job description is something I'm seeing more and more of on common job boards. So you might find yourself applying your product manager skill set to a data product. According to Aaron Merriweather, the most successful products are the ones using massive amounts of data in new and innovative ways. So this is where we get to the big data idea, and data lakes help us manage and harness big data. Embedded analytics, this is putting dashboards or little reports as little widgets inside of an operational workflow. And this can have some pretty big impacts. According to these reports from inside Big Data, 92% of users report competitive differentiation with this product, 90% report less churn. And Amazon, this is kind of a surprise to me, that their recommender accounts for 35% of its total sales. Product analytics, again, this is finding out what our users actually do, not just what they say they do. And product analytics helps you do that. It helps you track how efficient your product is at moving your users from one step of the user journey on to the next. And AI and ML, again, these are great buzzwords. I know we talked about them earlier, but they're only as good as the data that underlies them. So that whole metaphor that I showed you on the previous slide, all that has to be, we have to master that. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into garbage in, garbage out on a bigger scale. So there's great value to be had for data products if the company is willing to do the work to earn that value. So we're going to talk a little bit about data contracts. I think in the big data world, one of the biggest challenges we have is when the data producers don't know about or are unaware of how their data is being used downstream. So I think you can see how that would be a problem. Say if a software engineer changes the name of a field in their app without thinking about it, it could break an executive dashboard downstream and cause a week-long escalation, and nobody wants that. So let's talk about how data contracts might help. I think a good illustration of this problem is from Avengers Endgame. Any MCU friends here? One of my favorite scenes in that climactic battle scene. Wanda Maximoff confronts Thanos. "You took everything from me." Thanos coldly replies, "I don't even know who you are." And I think this is a good metaphor for data producers and data consumers. So how can data contracts help us here? They are API-like agreements between software engineers who own services and data consumers that understand how the business works. So this is a written agreement that all the parties from the source to the end consumers have had input into and can track and can be tracked in a like CI/CD check-in, similar to how some software testing is done. So they could include, but are not limited to, how the data is being extracted and into what schema. Again, we talked about master data management earlier. That's how some of that can come out and come to life in big data. Ingestion type and frequency, details of ownership and ingestion, InfoSec and governance, and most importantly, how it impacts downstream systems. So if you find yourself managing a data product, I highly encourage you to learn about and understand and advocate for data contracts. Alrighty, so does all this sound totally amazing? Yes. Alrighty, so you're ready to take your next steps to becoming a data product manager. So first, learn some SQL and Python. This is the lingua franca of big data. I mean, there's other tools as well. I don't mean to denigrate them, but if you know SQL and you know Python, you'll have a good understanding of data products and you'll earn some major street cred with your data engineering team. Next, get familiar with the free tiers of AWS and Google Cloud Platform. They have these free tiers that you can use for some free or very, very low cost experimentation and learning. So well worth the time. Next, go build a data product. So using these questions that I've listed here, which they're really the core of a data strategy, work through those using some of the techniques that Yulia showed us earlier. And just think about what are those problems that need to be solved and how can I solve it with data, and using your newly minted SQL and cloud skills, develop an MVP of the product. Finally, learn from the masters. I'm a really big fan of Douglas Laney. He wrote this great book called Infonomics. It did a lot to shape my thinking about how data is an asset and can be monetized, so definitely worth your time. Bill Schmarzo, The Art of Thinking Like a Data Scientist. This walks through a very methodical process, similar to what we saw with Yulia earlier, on how to apply data science to business problems. And there are a few people I read on LinkedIn whose feeds I say amen to more often than Chad Sanderson. And I referred to him back on the data contract slide. All right, so that's my magical mystery tour through the dark world of data management. So, all right, now's your chance to take some shots at me. So, how can I help you about data management?
My fantasy football team already drafted, so it's shot.
I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, well, where did you get your data from, and what were you trying to accomplish?
I was trying to avoid drafting people that were injured, but the AI, the ML, drafted people that were injured.
That AI and ML, you got to check those results after they give them to you. So, lesson learned from next year, right? Sir?
Here.
So you brought up how damaging it can be when there's a lack of trust or the data quality has gone downhill. I work at a company where we have some of our users that have expressed a mistrust in the data that powers our software. So any top level ideas about what actions can be taken to kind of regain some of that trust?
Yep. Thank you for asking that. That's a challenge I've had multiple times. I'll tell you it's not going to be easy, but there is a way. And the data contracts idea kind of hinted at it. As you do have to go start with where's this data coming from? What are we using it for? And how much of it do we really need and in what form? And then start putting some of that data through the process where everyone who's really interested in it and has a stake in it can kind of inspect it at each point in the process. And it's going to be long and painful, and they probably won't like doing it because it's unfamiliar. But at the end of that process, the stakeholders who have interest in it will feel a sense of ownership in that data pipeline. So that's a good place to start. And then kind of continually show how the results that you're getting comport with reality and are delivering legitimate business value. Sir?
This is a question about data lake.
Yep.
You mentioned data lake as a buzz, so I was trying to understand what are your thoughts on traditional or previous large warehouse systems versus data lake?
Well, we could probably give a whole presentation on just that topic, so I'll try to be brief. So in the traditional data warehousing world, that analytical dimensional model I showed earlier, it's kind of it's a restriction on what the user can see. They get to that data. Sometimes they can't even query the data. They just have to use it through a dashboard or report. So it's very kind of restrictive and narrow. But on the other hand, that is a little bit easier to govern. And so you won't have different definitions of common business entities that are kind of floating around. So the data warehousing world is not bad, but it is restrictive. In the data lake world, where things are a lot more open, like I mentioned earlier, you're planting a lot of different data sources where many different users can get at it. And data scientists love being able to use multiple data sources. But there's a little more work you have to do with this master data management and the governance, because if you have 20 different definitions of customer and SKU floating around the business, I think you can see how they lead to some pretty chaotic results. So the data lake is great, but you've got to invest the time in the governance and the quality. That's my view. So that comport with some of your experience? My pleasure. Chick-fil-A again, my pleasure. Okay, I think I have 5 more minutes here, so those burning questions about data management. I know you have them. This burns everybody.
So you had mentioned Google and AWS as resources for free skills, and IBM has a free data as well. Have you taken that course, and have you heard anything about it? Because I've heard that it's award-winning and recognized. That's specifically for data.
Okay. And so this young woman mentioned that IBM has a similar asset to Google Cloud Platform and AWS. I'm all of the above. If you find a platform that works for you and you have good training resources, just attack it and go at it. What I mentioned earlier is those are just the platforms, so you have to look a little bit for cloud instruction. I've used Coursera in the past for some other those types of training. So, but I'm all of the above. You ask me if I'm going to use Google Cloud Platform, AWS, or IBM, I'd say yes.
Thanks. Data is powerful. We all know that. As product owners, we find ourselves becoming data producers, right? And as data producers, we end up owning the idea of stewardships towards data consumers. How do you help manage expectations with newer data consumers, or you being a new data producer?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That's the challenge I think every product owner is going to have to wrestle with, because if we manage software products, those products generate data. And like that data contract slide, we don't want to be Thanos. And oh snap, I just changed it to a column head. Sorry. So I think we have an opportunity to be champions for data contracts, which is I think this is a data governance exercise, but what I like about this contract idea is it's very tangible. And it's something that can have some enforceability baked into it. So that's why I included that takeaway. Learn about data contracts and be advocates for them, because they can be great communication tools. It can really challenge us to think about who is really using this downstream and what are their true needs. We have our personas for our software products, but there might be some other personas we're really serving that we hadn't previously thought about. Does that help answer your question, sir? All right.
Thank you. Hello. Hi. So thank you so much for this session. I learned a word over here, agile dimensional modeling. How often do you use, like, is it used during proof of concept? What's the use cases of using that?
Sure. So in some previous jobs where I came up or where I've encountered this agile dimensional modeling ideas, first we just had, remember that shared savings that I talked about? That only needs a small number of data points. So when we started developing our model where we took the 4 different health insurance members and claims files and data streams, we only picked just 2 or 3 member columns and 3 or 4 claims columns, and we conformed all those into this agile dimensional model. After we got through the shared savings, then we wanted to do attribution, which is has richer data needs. So we had to add some additional columns to the member table and some additional columns to the claims table to help with the calculation and the business rules for attribution. So that's what I say when I mean agile data modeling and agile data pipelines. You just convert the raw sugar cane to sugar for just a few of the columns and tables that you need when you need them, and then you add on after that. That's that idea. Does that help you, ma'am? My pleasure. Anyone else?
So if a business stakeholder asks you for access to some data or to create a dashboard or something like that, what is the very first thing that you respond with? What kind of question would you ask that business stakeholder?
Thank you for asking that. I'd go back to that data strategy. What is the question you're really trying to answer? Or what is the problem we are really trying to solve? And in previous jobs, I would actually write those answers down on a whiteboard, right where everybody could see them. It's like an agile, it's an information radiator. I want everybody to see that so we don't forget about it once we get deep into the data sourcing and profiling and doing the hard work of writing that code. I want to have that North Star up on the board so that everyone understands what are we really trying to accomplish here. What's the burning question we want to answer, the really painful problem we're trying to solve. And then after a certain amount of time and iteration, come back to the business user, show them what we've developed and ask, are we getting close to answering that question or solving that problem for you? And I found that tends to facilitate a pretty helpful and productive conversation.